Hi everybody, I hope you're all well. I'm not right now. Um, I've woken up with a cold this morning, so I don't know how this sounds, or my voice could go a bit funny during the course of this video, or I might have to cough. Most likely I will, because someone's burning something outside. I don't know what, but it's really smoky and horrible, so I might have to cough. Just so you are aware, I apologise, but it's what has to happen. I've woken up this morning feeling run down, and it's right. So all this week has been very intense at work, but we got mammoth amount of work done, which I was so happy about, and for the bank holiday weekend here in the UK, and just be able to just go, I don't have to think about those massive piece of work anymore, which was amazing. And yesterday I went to town, totally fine, and then today I've woken up feeling run down and groggy and sorry. Yeah, really get a bit worse for the wear. So we'll just see what happens, but I think tomorrow my bank holiday Monday plans might be that I'll be in bed. I don't know. Let's see what happens. But yeah, I mean, as I said, I've been very busy with work and such. Sorry. And I have been watching something new, which I've really grown to. I've just absolutely loved, called Only Murders in the Building, which is on Disney Plus. I've had Disney Plus for like a year now, and I just haven't gotten round to Only Murders in the Building. And then on Thursday, I had the evening free, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna start watching it, see what I think. I've gotten through series 1 and 2, absolutely love it. And series 3 is in the middle of airing, because I do one episode a week, and I'm like, that I can't do the one episode a week thing. It's because each episode only about between 30 and 40 minutes. I want to binge it, so I'm going to wait the 5-6 weeks until series 3 is finished airing, and then I can just binge it like I did with The Mandalorian. I was just like, wait till series 3 is finished airing, binge the whole of series 3. So that's what I'm going to do with Only Murders in the Building. So yeah, that's what I've been up to this week. So because of my voice and that I'm not feeling that great, I'm going to make this review quite short and sharp, as it were, just so that I can then relax my voice and everything. So yeah, so apologies if I sound funny, if I go croaky, if I start coughing and spluttering like crazy. I can't help it. I'm ill. So I am here to talk about Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris by Paul Gallico. So, or Gallico? Gallico. I'm going to say Gallico. That's how I'm going to say. So I saw the recent film, which this is the tie-in cover for, because it's the only one I could get. I saw the film back in Stratford-upon-Avon in October last year. I randomly found one day a luxury cinema in the centre of Stratford-upon-Avon that I didn't know existed, and it was just starting to rain, and probably, I think about 20 minutes time, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris was going to start, and I was like, well, I'm here, I've got nothing planned, and it's just started raining. I could sit in the cinema for 2 hours and have myself some nice food and watch a film. Let's go for it. So I went in, and I had seen the trailer, but like a couple of months before, so I couldn't remember exactly what it was about, but vaguely could, but couldn't remember specifics of the trailer. So I kind of went in a bit blind, and I really, really loved the film. I thought it was great. I got it on DVD as soon as it came out. I showed it to my mum, and my mum absolutely loved it as well. And yeah, I really liked it. And then I found the book in Waterstones when I was back home after my trip, and so I got it. So yeah, so I'm here to talk about Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Now, Paul, he was a writer from, like, I think the 1950s, or it might have been late 40s, through to the end of his life in the late 70s, I believe it was. And he wrote about 40 books. So he was not new to literature and to writing when he wrote this book. So I was like, okay, I'm not thinking of, the debut novel hat on, where I give people credit for maybe not having certain techniques put in place and such. And my God, Paul was a great writer. Just so you're aware, this is only like 300 pages long. This is actually 2 books. Mrs. Harris actually has 4 adventures through the course of Paul's books. Only the first one is Paris, and this one has her adventures in Paris and New York. So actually, if you were to talk about just Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, we're only talking about that much of this book, but I have read all of it. So I will talk about both of them, but I'll mainly be talking about Paris because that is the one that this book is catered to, and what the film that that I was talking about was completely based on. So what is this about? So Mrs. Harris is a cleaning lady in 1957, I think it is. Oh, no, it starts in 1950, that's it, in London. And she cleans houses for so many different people for a certain amount per hour. She loves her job. She really enjoys it. Her husband went missing during the war, and she just basically has this very comfortable life. And then she discovers that finally she gets news that her husband tragically was killed in 1944. And so for the past 6 years of not knowing where he was, he's tragically died. And one day she is cleaning at the home of one of her employers, and she sees a Dior dress, and she falls head over heels in love with it. She is a seamstress. She does, she does washing, she does ironing, she does cleaning, she does seamstress. She does all of these jobs in order to survive. And she just falls in love with this Dior dress because it is so stunningly put together. And the woman, her employer, tells her that it cost £500. And she's like, what in the hell? How could you spend that much money on a dress? That's ridiculous. Because let's not forget, obviously, her clients are, a range of wealth and such. And this is a very wealthy woman. And so, yeah, Miss Harris could never imagine that amount of money to spend on a dress. But she decides that she is going to go to Paris and buy a Christian Dior dress. And it's all about her getting the money to going to Paris and discovering things about herself and about the world while she is there, and the people she encounters and the lives that she impacts by her presence. It's just an absolute charming book. And my God, the fact that this entire book is only 120 pages, my God, Paul knew how to write, to cram in so much information. I mean, like, just to put it in perspective, her building up the money in order to go to Paris is probably about half an hour of the recent film. He does that in about 10 pages, and the bulk of it has no dialogue. And the bulk of this book entirely has no dialogue, but there is dialogue in there. But yeah, her saving and all of this stuff and how she comes across the dress and yada 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 is within like 10 pages. It is insane how much he's able to cram in. And I love his description of Mrs. Harris on the very first paragraph. So the small, slender woman with apple-red cheeks, greying hair, and shrewd, almost naughty little eyes sat with her face pressed up against the cabin window of the BEA Viscount on the morning flight from London to Paris. As with a rush and a roar, it lifted itself from the runway. Her spirit soared aloft with it. She was nervous, but not at all frightened, for she was convinced that nothing could happen to her now. Hers was a bliss of one who knew what at last she was off upon her adventure, at the end of which lays her heart's desire. She was neatly dressed in a somewhat shabby brown twilled coat and clean brown cotton gloves, and she carried a battered imitation leather brown handbag, which she hugged close to her. As well as she might, for it contained not only 10 £1 notes, the legal limit of currency that could be exported from the British Isles, and a return air ticket to Paris, but likewise the sum of $1,400 in American currency, a thick roll of $5, $10, and $20 bills held together with rubber bands. Only in the hat she wore did her exuberant nature manifest itself, for it was of green straw to the front of it, and to the front of it was attached the flexible stem of a huge and preposterous rose, which leant this way and that, seemingly following the hand of the pilot upon the wheel as the plane banked and circled for altitude. I love that. As soon as I read that, I was like, oh, I'm in good hands. I am in good hands. Paul is exquisite with his lyricism, his choice of words, and the flow, and that, like, you felt like, I love the cheeky smile and the apple rose cheeks and such, and also the fluidity of everything. You felt the up and down of the plane and such going through. I loved it. I loved that. There was some very interesting because it's such a short book. I found it very, very interesting that for some characters he gave you very little information about them because he just didn't have the time, he didn't have the space. But for other ones, he decided to give you like their whole backstory the moment that they appear, and it was like, oh, okay, that's wow. One in particular, Mrs. Charmont, who in the film, I know I'm doing a comparison to the film, but just for structuring wise, we're kind of mystified by her through the film, and then near the end of it we get to learn some backstory about her, whereas this, literally, her name is stated as soon as she steps into the thing, and then we get an entire page backstory about her, and then it's like, right, now you know, let's go. I was like, oh, okay, so we can understand why she does the things that she does. But I kind of like the film in that we don't know that we get to discover her backstory at the end, and then it makes complete sense because the things that she says and does, yeah, there's some interesting stuff in there. Sorry. I loved the way that he passionately wrote about Paris. He does write very passionately about England as well, but I think he makes it very clear that they are two completely contrasting worlds. And Mrs. Harris is the bridge between them, and she is so heartwarming. She is so loving. She is just a beautiful character inside and out. I just found myself just completely swept up by this charming story, and it's so heartwarming as well. And I think that's what it got made into a film, and it has been very, very popular amongst its target audience. It was, I mean, obviously it wasn't like a massive box office hit. I'm not like comparing it to something like James Bond or anything like that. But for its target audience, it was really well received, and yeah, I think Leslie Manville did a great job. I have to admit, I was a little let down by the ending. Simply because, and I know, again, this is comparing film to book, I think the film did the right thing in changing the ending of the story. Technically it kept to the end of the story, but at the same time there is a change, and it's the change that actually got me tearing up in the cinema when I saw it, and I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that ending. So I have to say, Paul, I really like your writing, very well put together, great story, but the ending just, oh, if only you just did the thing that they did in the film, I would have been like 5-star, absolutely incredible, absolutely loved it. Now, when it comes to the second book, Mrs. Harris Goes to New York, I kind of felt like it. Okay, I'm going to be honest. It felt like it was a bit of a cash cow. Like, clearly, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris was a really popular book for him at the time or something, and so he decided to write a sequel, and then he wrote 2 more sequels. And this sequel, to be honest, this first one, Miss Harris Goes to New York, it kind of feels a bit pointless. So Mrs. Harris ends up going to New York because she one of her employers he moves to New York in order to basically do his job. And when she goes over, she encounters a little boy who has been orphaned, and the 2 of them set off to go find his parents. Basically, he's been abandoned, not orphaned, sorry, but technically I suppose you could say he is orphaned because he was abandoned, and they basically set off on this mission to find his parents. And it kind of feels like, okay, I get what you're doing, but then why are you doing it? Almost like Mrs. Harris, her love and her warmth and everything is so bold and wonderful, and she is still bold and wonderful in when she goes to New York, but at the same time it kind of feels like to me that she becomes the sweet old lady stereotype, as it were, through the second book. And so it feels like, why is she doing it? In the first one, it's about her learning who she is, and also learning how life can go on, because she's been stuck in this same situation where she hasn't stood up for herself for so long, because she's had this thing about her husband is going to come home, and then finding that he is gone and there is a new opportunity for her. She does the courageous thing of going for it, and it's about her courage and her love and her determination and finding the beauty in the world through the darkness, and then having that to then going to being this old lady caricature and basically just helping out a little boy. It didn't feel right. There are a few characters who come back in New York who were in Paris, which was nice to see, but at the same time it just felt like I'm not all that convinced by this one. And to be honest, because I haven't read the second one, I wouldn't necessarily want to read the third or the fourth one. So if I were to go back to this book, I would just read the first book, that Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, and not bother with New York. That's how I feel. So as I said, there's the film version with Leslie Manville playing Mrs. Harris. I loved her take on Mrs. Harris. I think she played her beautifully, just as how I imagine Mrs. Harris, and the rest of the cast here are absolutely fantastic as well. It's an absolutely charming film, and it's just a lovely, like it was for me when I went to the cinema to see it, that it was just an escape for 2 hours, and I loved every single minute of it. I don't care if I was, too young for the target audience or whatever. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And so did my mum and other people who I've encountered who have watched this film. If you've watched this film and you haven't read the book is just as charming, just as beautiful. It's just the ending of this film is so much better than the book for me. There is a version with Angela Lansbury, sorry, from the 90s, which I didn't get the opportunity to see, unfortunately, for this review. But if I am able to get hold of a copy, you'll find it somewhere. It's probably on YouTube, and I just haven't come across it. But if I do have the opportunity, I will watch it and see what I think. But I have watched little clips of it, and I think Angela Lansbury did very, very well as Mrs. Harris as well. But that's all I can say from little clips that I've seen. So I don't want to comment on it as a whole if I don't know what it was like overall. But yeah, definitely I would recommend the 2022 film version. So those are my thoughts on Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris while I still have a voice. Sorry. Have you read this book? I'd like to know what you think. Leave comments in the comments box below. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, entirely up to you on each side. And I'll be back with my thoughts, hopefully without this cold, on Mrs. England by Stacey Halls, from an author who I have not read any work from before. So it'd be very interesting to see what I think of that. All right, there you are. Bye.